Welcome to episode 101 of the Hard Truth About B2B E-commerce. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Bollinger. Unfortunately, Tim is not with us because we're doing kind of a special day before July 4th, cramming in the podcast, and I'm going to be traveling for a little while, so need to get some stuff in before. Let's do a quick break for our sponsors, and then we'll be right back.
Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance.
Welcome back, and I'm excited to introduce Chris Shipferling, who is a managing partner at, how do I say it correctly?
South Col.
South Col. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm already confusing you with the other firm. So you're involved in two firms.
Yeah.
Can you give us the background of both the firms and just like leading up to what got you onto your own? I think there's a background that kind of got you started on this path. So
Yeah, man, I'll try and be succinct, but I'll kind of walk you through the yellow brick road of where things started. So, like you and I discussed, I started in the nitty gritty of working for a brand that was almost, entirely retail driven. Started back in 2003 in the baby product space. So having worked with so one of the first baby brands to sell to this really weird bookseller called Amazon.com that came through our trade show asking a bunch of other baby brands if they could sell product on their marketplace. Moving to CSN Stores, if you remember them, which is now Wayfair.com. So having
they started as like a bunch of websites, right? Isn't that how Wayfair started? It was like,
oh yeah, man. I remember meeting with them just right near your neck of the woods downtown and thinking, wow, what a modern office. This is super cool. But so kind of working for a brand through about 2010. It was a Japanese-based company. I then moved over to a much larger company that's more of a household name called Evenflow. Worked with them for 3 years, and at that time, really just had a lot of I would say retail experience, e-tail as they would call it back then experience. Not a whole lot of marketplace or direct to consumer, and so kind of moving into kind of as my career evolved, I managed North America for a fairly large family-owned brand in the baby product space called Jane or Hane, depending if you're speaking Spanish or Catalan, because they're Barcelona-based.
So we actually worked with Durell Juvenile a long time ago. Are they relevant in that space? And other?
Yeah, I mean, Durell is a direct competitor against Evenflow for sure. Durell, Graco, and Evenflow, they have the market.
I remember Graco. They would always, I remember that.
That's right. So those three are kind of the big giants in the space. So it was actually when I was working with Jane, I was with a buyer at Bye Bye Baby. I can say it out loud because they no longer exist, at least for now. I was with a buyer and
I think Overstock, sorry to cut you, Overstock adopting the name, right?
They bought all the IP and assets for Bed Bath & Beyond, but Bye Bye Baby is on the auction block right now.
Oh, so it was only, okay, that didn't include that as part of the...
They split the baby. Yeah, they split up. So giving a biblical term. So yeah, that's still on the auction table right now.
You're not going to buy it? Is that going to be a South investment?
No, man. I do not have that kind of cash just sitting in the back pocket. So, but I was with the buyer there, and I'm sure folks on your podcast who are listening can relate to this. I was just really tired of the subjective opinion, and there was really no data being brought to the table. It was, I like, I feel, I believe, and not, hey, let's talk about what the data is saying. What are parents really wanting out of a product? What really drives? I mean, brands put together product based on a lot of information and data, and they bring it to the table of retailers because typically it solves a problem. It creates a solution. And so, or you're commoditized, right? You're just tape or a battery, and you're just a better price.
Yeah.
But in this case, you know, there was a lot of really strong innovation that was placed into these products. And I was just really tired of subjective opinion. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go talk to the consumer, because I think the consumer has a lot more to say than you do. And I did. So at that point, I just really, it was the genesis of pivoting my own career away from just kind of pure trade marketing, you know, big type of key account management, sales, large sales management, to I'm going to go talk directly to the consumer. I started on Amazon. I learned that marketplace back in 2014 up and down, how to sell a widget through Amazon. That led to understanding how to take a widget at the time and put it through different acquisition channels, how to reach the consumer, drive that traffic, acquire that traffic through that conversion, and really just kind of understand how that works, a direct to consumer strategy. So from there, man, I started my own consulting firm, helped, it was in the baby and toy space, helped those companies formulate digital strategy, like real digital strategy, not just, well, I think we need to do a better job of selling on target.com. No, let's do a better job at emailing all of the emails you have in your database. And what does that mean? And what are we going to do with that? How are you going to talk to them? Because you've got a lot of assets here in terms of how to do it. You have the ability to speak to directly to the consumer, and the ability to own the consumer and the data. Let's go do it. But we got to do it the right way. You can't just throw a bunch of spaghetti against the wall.
Yeah.
Because the time there was and you probably run into this now, you know, there's just this like, well, let's just put somebody who knows e-commerce in front of it and they'll do a good job.
Oh,
and that's what happens a lot at these larger brands.
Just hoping, they're hoping that the person they hire is the right hire, but they really don't know. Sometimes the titles,
there's no strategy. There's no strategy, and all these things have to talk to each other. They all have to work, you know, and that's a big struggle right now for brands. They're going, well, I can't harm my Walmart relationship. And you're like, it's not harming, you're actually going to help the Walmart relationship. Digital marketing, it helps everything when it comes to sales across everywhere, because there are still a swath of people that just don't want to buy direct from you, especially in the baby product space. You still want to go into a store. That's why I like Buy Buy Baby going out, even though Amazon does own a lot of market share. Buy Buy Baby going out has been a big hit to the ability of the consumer to walk into a store.
Yeah.
So just general awareness for these brands. So yeah, man, I'm harping on that just because that was such a pivot in my own career. But then I started a lower middle market investment bank with 3 other guys here in Charlotte, North Carolina. They were big institutional investment bankers. Well, at least 2 of them were. One had a little bit of a different history. But we started with the thesis that, hey, small business, 10 million, 5 million, 50 million of revenue, they deserve a better process. They deserve more of an institutional level process. You know, it's really hard for them to, if they're engaged with a business broker, that business broker to go and then present the opportunity to some big corporate strategic desk or some financial sponsor, like a big private equity fund. They don't take business brokers that seriously. And so kind of being that, I'd say, liaison between taking a really good opportunity that normally wouldn't get a good look from the middle market, that's e-commerce driven, e-commerce focused, consumer products focused, and being able to present that opportunity to somebody who normally doesn't necessarily come down market. Our thesis was, if we do that, it'll be a much better process, a much more optimized outcome for the business owner. And we were right. That was 6 years ago.
Yeah, so
And
there's a
so,
gap in the market where the investors, they only want to write these big checks, basically, right? Yeah.
yeah, it's like big checks and they're used to a very specific process. And, they just won't take a business seriously if the business isn't taking themselves seriously. So if they've engaged with a local business broker who, let's be honest, doesn't have the acumen, and you feel like you're talking a bit to a used car salesman, they're just like, I don't want to deal with it. Like, I just don't even want to, I don't want to see it. And also, that process has a really hard time even finding or getting in front of those people to begin with. Whereas we run more of an institutional level process when it comes to selling the company, well, that process lends itself to finding the right buyer, not just, oh, I listed it on a website and I hit an email out to a bunch of people who were on my email list to buy the company.
So are you guys doing the direct investment or also the brokering or both?
So that was for GW Partners. And then that led to being involved in that, led to having some really great conversations with our joint venture partners in South Col. So we started South Col about a year ago, and that's a joint venture growth fund, accelerator fund with SellerSpy, which is a big lender to e-commerce businesses, Escala/Multiply Me, which is a big business consulting firm that really focuses in on operational excellence for e-commerce businesses, and then us, GW Partners. So that all led to kind of going right after what you said, like, do you take direct investments? Well, we didn't. What we were doing was selling the companies on behalf of the founder owner. And then we said, hey, there's an opportunity here to take minority investment inside of these businesses, so less than 50%, inject strategic capital, strategic resources. We've got the answers to the test, so we know how to really optimize these companies towards a much better sale. So why don't we do that as well? Because not everybody wants that, because you've got to take equity.
Yeah, sorry to, I'm just so interested because it's a pretty unique angle that most investors, I find, won't take a minority stake at that size. So is that what how do you guys de-risk that? Or what happens if the owner says, you know what, I'm not going to sell anymore? Like, how do you guys navigate that? Because most people
yeah, I mean, there's always some type of buyout clause. There's always something in there. And I mean, look, the nature of the way that we operate, the venture debt product that we inject into the company is 2 years interest only. And after year 2 going into 3, it amorts. And of course, the principal payback period begins. So that in itself motivates the owner to say, hey, let's go ahead and we took this debt product that is one of the most advantageous on the market, and you can't find anywhere except for through South Col. And we built the company because the P&L had a chance to breathe, the cash flow was able to breathe. But I don't really, let's go ahead and sell this where I have to pay back the principal. Like, that's the whole point of it. So that's one way. Some business owners don't care. They might say, well, yeah, I'll pay it back. I mean, if you grew the company and the cash flow will be there, we'll just pay back the principal. But now I'm a much larger company and I want to run this for another 3 or 4 years. Okay, cool. So we'll keep riding along with you and keep helping to inject more capital and more resources to make it bigger. And or we do have some type of clause in there that says, hey, you can go ahead and buy us out if you just never want to sell the company.
Interesting. So you guys are kind of okay with the flexibility, like you're not.
Yeah, which by the way, what I just said is it's very standard. Like, it's not off market. The part about like a buyout clause, that's not off market. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to me, the minority investment part, because that I find is more rare in private equity, smaller deals, right?
You don't find it a ton. Like, there are growth funds that are out there, and they're like a version of venture capital, but they're more private equity, and they are more longer. They're a longer hold. They're a longer term. Like, they'll never come to you and say 2 years. So we're like this odd unicorn of like, hey, we're here to accelerate your growth because you probably were going to go to market sometime in the next 12 months anyways. You're probably going to sell your company. Why don't you just wait another year, or let us inject this capital along with these resources to get not to this exit, but this exit.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And some founder owners, look, a lot of founder owners, to be blunt, don't like the idea of giving up equity, and that's okay. And that's also why we have the option for them to potentially just use us to sell the company.
Yeah. So let's get into B2B e-commerce a little bit. Like, I think that there's three main kind of types that we see. I guess you could argue there's a fourth, but you kind of have these manufacturers, and they're in this weird spot where they're like, do I go to, like, the Durrells or the ones you used to work with, were like, some of them are still not really going full into direct to consumer.
Yeah.
They're kind of dipping their toes into B2B commerce. And then they have these like big channel partners, or like the big sales relationships. It seems like they're scared to disrupt that and go serious into e-commerce. And you see a similar aspect of that with distributors, although distributors are also probably even more scared to go direct to consumer from what I've seen.
Yeah.
So what has your experience been in kind of that world, which is, I would say, even further behind than direct to consumer,
Yeah, I mean, it's much further behind. I'd say, look, I think brands through COVID were caught with their, I don't want to sound crass, but their pants down, basically. Like, they were just kind of like, what do we do with this whole direct to consumer thing? Because all of our channels just shut down.
Yeah.
And so how do we respond to this? And I think, I'm not going to be egregious and say a lot, but I do think that in some categories more than others, they were not very well prepared for being able to service the consumer. And again, that was a, hopefully, knock on wood somewhere, once in a lifetime event. But there was a shift. It didn't happen nearly as forceful as McKinsey thought it would be. Remember when they came out with that whole report?
Yeah.
At the same time, though, it did accelerate the use of direct-to-consumer online shopping for a pretty large swath of people, consumers, who before just primarily used, brick and mortar as their medium to purchase things. A lot of it was in grocery. Like, there was a big shift, Instacart, of course, and still, and having your groceries delivered to your house became big, and people just kind of didn't stop with that. But a lot of brands, I think through the pandemic, I think prior to that, there wasn't necessarily as much of a sense of urgency. And now they're trying to play some massive catch up. And, really great brands are understanding, and I'm sure you've got this direct experience as well. Really great brands are understanding that direct to consumer or a digital marketing effort is not in competition to your retail channel partners at all. They actually work hand in hand very well. And more now, the Targets of the world, even the Walmarts of the world, especially with their big push on marketplace, that's what they're pushing more and more is kind of like Target Plus. They're pushing more marketplace, even though I think Target's so behind on the 8 ball, but we could have a whole conversation about that. Walmart's making awesome strides. Like, they are killing it when it comes to marketplace. They just don't have the traffic yet. I've got direct experience with that Amazon does. But more and more buyers for the stores, because shelf space is becoming so much harder to get, are relying on a brand to come in with a digital strategy. How are you going to drive that consumer? Yeah, I agree. I love your product. I think it has innovation. I think it solves a problem. We can put it on end caps. We can do all these things, and we can put a shelf talker up, and we can, whatever, as far as kind of in-store marketing. What are you going to do to drive the consumer here? And so at that point, then your website becomes very important, because that is your place to really educate the consumer as you're driving that traffic, because the last thing you want to do, it's not the last thing, and it's not the worst thing, but you don't want to spend, $1 million a month, say, on Google. I'm going egregious with budgets, or even 100,000 on Google ads to drive that traffic just to your retail partners. You want to drive it somewhere, a landing page, grab the information, let them get fully educated, and then make the decision on where to go and purchase the product.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like I want to take a little bit more, and I think this is where more brands are starting to realize, they're also starting to understand that they've got to be much more involved when it comes to social media, like TikTok, and drive really great social strategies when it comes to all of these different social channels as well. But utilizing the acquisition channel as a way to say, direct to consumer is another channel for us. It's not necessarily a priority. Omnichannel is the priority, but educating and educating the consumer, awareness to the consumer, and then really doing what you can to own the data. That's important, but it's a little bit of a side note. They should play very well hand in hand. So as far as direct to consumer, going right back to kind of your direct question, direct to consumer and brands and kind of B2B, where are they? I think COVID really hit them over the head. And I think more and more they're giving a much, much more thought to how do we really tackle this. It's a bit like Hasbro. I mean, they kind of saw where China was going. And I think back in 2010, I read an article that the CEO went ahead and started the process of taking everything away from China, manufacturing wise.
Wow.
And it took 10 years to do it, but he did it. And then when the pandemic hit, which, I mean, he wasn't doing it because he knew COVID was coming.
Yeah, now he looks like a genius, right? I mean,
he does, because he had product, he had inventory, like he was able to, even though the ports were all gone.
Hasbro is a good example, right? Is like, how do you, these legacy companies, I think they struggle with direct consumer, but then even still, it's like, why, if I'm a little toy store, I probably want to just buy in my B2B, e-commerce experience, like to re-up maybe 10 units of that, 10 units of that. And it seems like they're all pretty far behind culturally on this. They're still operating in the like call my sales rep model. And I just have a hard time believing that the call my sales rep model is going to be competitive for that much longer. Like how much longer?
It's not the model. You totally nailed it. Look, I've got friends who are sales reps and friends that have been very successful as sales reps who they actually have completely changed their model themselves. They pivoted to one that I know of almost completely has changed their model to only managing Walmart marketplace, period.
For like, that's the channel he manages for his.
Yeah, like they were selling. I mean, they were my sales rep at Babies R Us. I mean, they were my sales rep for Bye Bye Baby when I was working, in that life. And now they're no longer a sales rep. They are an agency. Like they've completely pivoted and changed their business model completely. So they're like, hey, you know what? Because they see the writing on the wall. I mean, you nailed it, Isaiah. The reality is, what is a sales rep? What's the value of a sales rep going forward? Well, the value is you can make introductions for me. Okay. Well, that only is just that. I mean, I need you either, because the other thing too is like, for instance, and like Target, if you go to Minneapolis or you go to Bentonville, you have these agencies, as you well know, that are like, they are Target agencies, Best Buy agencies, Kohl's, et cetera.
Walmart, I heard about that. Like you have to like live in Walmart if you're like buy Walmart if you're.
Yeah, and I mean, look, that's kind of where that sales rep model is going. And these are all former like Target executives, Target middle, DMMs, GMs.
Yeah,
they're all like, they had high level jobs in specific categories. And that's effectively kind of replacing the sales rep model, where it's like, okay, I'm going to hire this agency, but their value is it's more than relationship. They do all the legwork that a key account manager would do, competitive landscapes and understanding kind of how it would sit on shelf and positioning the product in Target and why it makes sense, and putting together the presentation decks, meeting with the analysts, meeting with the planners, making sure there's enough inventory inside of the stores. I mean, that's really where the sales rep is going. If
a consultant, right? You basically have to become a consultant. But that's why I think if these companies aren't enabling the buying process digitally, they're going to fall behind because their sales reps are spending all their time just taking orders.
Well, and it's just like, why am I going to, wow, there's so many ways to slice this, but like, let's just take one, I'll take one avenue, right? So why am I going to pay this sales rep 10% commission? And let's add up all of the commissions that I paid this person over a year or 2 years, where I could have totally renovated the way that all the small toy stores purchase from me, right? I could have created this really incredible portal that, was basically like some ERP or like an API of a portal API into the ERP from an inventory perspective, right? I could have done something like that. And then I'm also now reallocating my effort, my money into driving awareness for that mom and pop store for people to walk in and want to buy the product.
Yeah.
At that point, that's effectively where this whole world is going. The value of a sales rep before was I couldn't reach anyone digitally. And I mean, sales reps, it's an old dog trade. I couldn't reach anybody digitally. So I needed somebody physical to go into a store, build a relationship with that client, and also make sure that there's inventory, make sure that the store clerks are all trained. I mean, again, that's all being replaced digitally these days.
Because now it's like, you can tie into the APIs of these back office systems and get the information, right? Like theoretically, all these companies should be able to service the information to the customer or the business,
totally,
in real time.
Well, and the other thing too is, look, our retail environment is changing. I've got a good friend of mine who owns a store out in Oakland, California, or right near Oakland, Dublin, California, outside of the Bay. And, at one point it's a baby product store. And at one point, I'm just going to make up a number, but I want to say it was like 4,000 square feet. Well, now it's like 1,200 square feet and it's by appointment only. And, the appointment only is basically a concierge type service because it's his girlfriend, but she's an expert in car seats. And so it's like, look, if you don't need the expertise, don't come in, just buy it from me online. I've got the stock. That's all you care about. All you care about as a consumer is, can I get it? How fast can I get it? Once I know I want it, if a company has a MAP pricing policy and it's just pretty much like MAP across the board, well, then you usually shift to, okay, well, if I can't afford a big ticket item, is there a 6 months, no interest, to 12 months, or 6 months, 6 months interest only or no interest, whatever it may be, 12-month, et cetera, like Best Buy does. Can I get rewards? Like you start to flip to that, but mostly what you flip to is, I just want to get it now. Like, I don't want to wait. I want to get it now. So like his local shop is focused on speed, inventory, and expertise. And so even the retail environments are changing in the way that they're working with consumers, So anyways.
And B2B, if you think about it, you need a part for a specific purpose. If really what you care about is the price and speed, right? Like, can I get this part or whatever for my business quickly? If anything, as a business, you have even more need to care about speed and price than a consumer. Sometimes I think could care a little bit about the experience of like shopping. There's some people will enjoy that, but as a business, it's like, I don't think any business is like enjoying the shop. Like, they're doing it for their job. So if anything, they care even less from a B2B e-commerce.
Well, that's right. And I think that's where, again, there are going to be plenty of people listening to this podcast and going, well, that's not my industry. And you know what? You're right. There's nuances in every industry. But I think from a vanilla perspective, what we're really talking about is the evolution of how the consumer shops and the evolution of just consumer products and retail in general will force brands to become much different in how they react to servicing the retailer, and then ultimately servicing or reaching the consumer. I mean, that there's no, it's irrefutable. That is changing and will continue to change.
What I also find interesting is some of these B2B companies, especially like distributors, they're so behind in modern marketing.
Oh, it's bad.
They've never, you know, at least manufacturers, some of them have built a little bit of a brand because their end customer is a consumer. But like distributors, for instance, if they've never done direct to consumer and they're used to just calling up customers, they've never really invested in marketing. And like I find a lot of them are like, well, we just want SEO. Like they have these like broad buzzwords, but they don't really understand how it all works. And they're
that's
you know what I mean?
That's my point. It's a little bit like, you know, I mean, we all had the grandma who's like, oh, your cousin is so smart. He fixed my computer. And like, all he really did was just turn the computer on. It's just grandma doesn't know anything about computers. You know, it's like, it's that mentality of like, I don't want to call it ignorance because that feels a bit like egregious, but like, it's a lot of ignorance, to be blunt. I mean, it's a lot of people going, well, I think I need a digital strategy. So yeah, to your point, it's like, I need SEO. It's like, do you know what that means? Do you know what SEM means? Do you know what an acquisition channel is? Do you know what MER is? Do you know what LTV is? Do you know what your CAC is? Like, you don't know anything. So let's sit at the table together and, you know, have a discussion, a strategic conversation about what it really looks like. What does it really mean for you to become digitally minded now and digitally focused for your particular industry? What does that really look like?
Yeah.
And that's really the conversation.
That's a good point. Like, it's almost like that's where a lot of these B2B companies should, or just let's call them kind of non-internet first companies should start, right? Is like, what are all the things I could be doing? Let's talk to Isaiah or Chris. And like, I think the problem is they latch on to like one concept, like, oh, we got to re-platform or we got to do this one thing like SEO, when it's really like, how do we, like, what's our strategy from the ground up?
Yeah, well, I mean, it always starts with that, right? It's always it's the why. Why are you even wanting to do this? Like, and that usually informs the strategy. The strategy has, I mean, a scroll's worth of questions to ask about that. And then you get to get into the tactics, but it all rolls up to, why are we even wanting to do whatever it is we think we need to do? So like your point, as a distributor, why do I want to be digitally minded, digitally focused? Well, I'm sure we could sit at a table, you know, from a consultancy perspective and come up with 20 reasons why that's important for your long-term sustainability, and also on driving accretive revenue over the other distributor, because not all distributors these days have strong distribution agreements. You know, they might be competing with other distributors, right, on the same type of product. Now, most of them do have distribution agreements and blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, okay, well, if you have a distribution agreement, because a lot of distributors are utilized by foreign entities to distribute their product because the foreign company doesn't want to actually build anything here domestically, right? They're already shortcutting. So it's like, well, I want to become digitally minded so I can go back and report to the company that I'm distributing for, hey, I am kicking A and taking names when it comes to distributing your product. And oh, by the way, it's causing a lot of wave in the space of the things I'm doing to drive more revenue for you, and other people are taking notice. I mean, look, that is a nuance, and I'm picking on something like one avenue, but like, back to your point, man, you got to drive it back to the why. Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to become digitally focused, digitally minded? Why do you want to start as an old dog automotive parts distributor? Why do you want to do this? Well, let's sit at the table. I promise by the time we're done talking to an Isaiah, you're going to have 20 reasons why you should do this.
Do you think that there's kind of an onus on the owners? And I know we're running out of time here a little bit, so I'll try and wrap up, but I think it's really important. Do you think there's an onus on the owners, the executives? And that's where I think that the challenge is that like I think you said this earlier, they kind of hire the e-com guy, some young, 25, 30-year-old guy, go figure it out. And they just like throw him into the lion's den, expect him to work magic. But I feel like what this really requires is alignment from top to bottom, because it involves operations, it involves ERP, it involves customer service, it involves sales reps. And I think without like kind of that executive, willingness to at least learn and get involved, it's never going to really be very successful if the executives are just so far removed,
You nailed it, man. I mean, that's like 110% correct. I mean, you have to have the buy-in of whoever is owning, managing, running the business, whether that's the chairman, whether that's the CEO, whether that's the founder owner. He's got to have a lot of buy-in and equity in what's happening in terms of like pursuing this type, whatever it may be. I'm a traditional B2B, I'm a traditional distributor, but now I want to start reaching the consumer. Maybe I don't want to sell to them. Maybe I just want to drive more awareness. Okay, great. Well, that's one strategy. But maybe I do want to start selling to them. That's another strategy. Well, yeah, the CEO of the company can't be like, okay, well, we're just I'm only half baked on this. Give it a college try, come back to me when it fails, right? Type of mentality. That's in 2023. If you hear anybody say that out loud and you're working in the company, I would run as far away from that company as I possibly could. You will be irrelevant soon.
And what do you think do you think that they have a responsibility to stay relevant, to like go and get educated, or they should go reach out to consultants, or because it seems like
100%. I think it's on them. I think it's on them to say, okay, because look, there is no executive that's good that's sitting back and planning month to month or year to year. You're always planning on a 3, 5, 10-year basis, right? These are B school guys who were taught at some potentially fairly prestigious business schools on how to think in process and strategy, right? And so when you think in that mindset, you are thinking about, I'm here today, but I want to be this tomorrow. When you're looking around and the entire world is on this, and you're a consumer products business and everybody is staring at this thing or this thing, but you want to continue to drive your business from an old school perspective. I mean, look, maybe heavy machinery, that's fine. Maybe. I have a friend of mine who sells really, really big equipment, and the way he tells me how their company works, I'm like, wow, that is antiquated, but it works.
Well, I'll tell you, I was just at B2B Envision, and Caterpillar was there, and Caterpillar has IoT in all their devices, so it's all now connected to a portal, so you can log in and see, like, they're pretty digitally advanced.
It's huge. That's my point. But I think, and you and I spoke about this, Caterpillar has invested a lot of cash. These big enterprise level brands were at that conference that you mentioned. I mean, they're putting some real dollars behind it. It's not just like a pet project. It is we have a CTO now where we didn't have a CTO. Yeah. We have an IoT. My gosh, man. I remember years ago having to explain what that is to people, but now that's becoming very common. Yeah. And 100%, especially enterprise level brands like that need to be adopting not only everything we just discussed, but yes, IoT for sure. If you're a consumer products company.
My point is, like, I think you're right. I think the industrial guys, whatever, some really complicated thing, they can last a little bit longer in this legacy world. But to me, it really is, instead of only having 3 years, maybe they have 5 years or 7 years. Eventually, the buying behavior is going to get so much more digitally native, because, the millennials are going to be 45 years old eventually, and they're going to be wanting to buy, their parts online. You know what I mean? Like, whatever it is.
Well, also, I mean, yes, exactly. Let's pick on the antiquated industry, and let's just stay with heavy machinery for a moment. I mean,
Yeah.
The product and the innovation of this heavy machinery, whether it's Bergman or it's Volvo or it's what's the Japanese brand? I forgot the name, but like, or Caterpillar, like, you know, these products are going to continue to evolve and get smarter and smarter and smarter and electric, and they're going to be.
Well, that's the other thing, right? I mean, they're almost going to all be these like IoT devices, right?
Yeah. So imagine, you know, and again, I don't want to create stereotypes here, but like Bubba shows up and he with his clipboard and asks, well, how many do you want to order? It feels like, what? Well, this feels weird and very off-brand, and I don't trust any of this. And how am I going to trust that you, A, know this machinery, B, I'm going to get serviced the way I need to be serviced with this very like highly intellectual machine? It's no longer just, you know, a backhoe, a large backhoe with a bunch of controls. Like, this thing is autonomous and can work on its own. Like, walk me through all of your technicians and how are you going to, you get my point. Like,
Yeah, can I schedule a technician like right on the website? Boom, he shows up.
That's right.
You know, yeah, all this stuff is going to be so much more interconnected. And from an industrial perspective, it kind of even makes more sense, because if you're going to spend, you know, $100 grand or $1 million on a machine, it probably also makes sense that it's somehow digitally connected, because that little connection probably isn't that expensive per unit relative to all the other costs that go into it. You know what I mean? Adding a little computer chip, it's probably not
totally.
that, you know.
Let's pick on something in recent history that I saw that just totally. And again, you know what's why executives also need to be very keen, and probably most of them are. So I don't want to sit here and speak like, oh, no one's doing this and most executives probably are, but anyone who can come to market with like what Caterpillar did, it's now a disruptor, and you are now seen as better than. It's also a branding play.
Yeah.
The other thing I saw recently, I had to get my oil changed, and I called Firestone across the street. I called them. Well, you got to leave your car with us all day, and I don't know when it's going to be back. And they were like, and it was almost like an ancillary thing. They're like, we can also come to your house. I was like, what? Like, yeah, just give us your cell phone number and we'll text you how to do that. Well, it was awesome. I reasons I couldn't do it. I actually needed to get the oil changed right away, because when they could come to my house, it didn't work out. But they texted me, clicked on the link, went, I could schedule, put all my information. All I would do is just leave my car in the driveway. Someone shows up, change my oil, pay by credit card through the platform. I never have to talk to the technician unless, you know, they found something really wrong with it. And then they go on their merry way. And I'm like, that's a disruptor.
Yes.
That's awesome.
That digital enablement. Yeah. I think that like the summary of all this is like B2B e-commerce is really just an evolution of digital enablement for more channels, right?
All it is.
Amazon, buy direct as the business, like Amazon Business, right?
Yeah.
It's just people want to do things faster, cheaper, easier. And if the answer is I got to call you up for everything, that doesn't scale. It's not, you can't scale that.
It doesn't scale. And especially as fast as things are moving now, as fast as the consumer. And look, you know, from a consumer products goods perspective, Amazon changed the game, man. I expect things in 1 day, 2 days max now.
Yeah.
They just did.
Yeah.
So,
well,
anyways.
I know we're already a little over time here. So any last parting words, or, you know, especially any mid-market people that want to reach out and
yeah, look, I mean, anybody who wants to have a further discussion around just any and all of this and how and why it's so important for their business, and also too, just how it all helps increase the value of your business. By all means, please reach out. It's cs@southcol.co, SOUTHCOL.co. I'm happy to answer anybody's questions, etc. And I mean, my other parting thing is, anybody who's listening and hasn't called you yet, by all means, like, pick up the stupid phone and call him and get a free consultation.
That's what people don't realize is like we give a lot of free information away because
You do. It's
a long
important,
tail,
man.
like,
It's good.
even if you're not ready to buy right now, like I'll talk to you and say, come reach back out in 6 months when you're ready. I mean,
Totally.
people don't realize like we're there to help and
Yes.
further the conversation. You know, I think people underestimate how much information they could get for free by just calling.
100%. This podcast. I mean, the fact that you're on episode 100 and what
101, yeah, it's kind of a special
101,
episode.
baby. I mean, that's a lot of free advice, man.
Yeah, seriously, exactly.
So,
well, thank you so much, Chris, and enjoy the 4th. I'm glad we snuck this in. It'll come up after the 4th, so it won't be
awesome.
till after, but
all right, Isaiah, thank you, man.
Thanks, Chris.